Brewing, although they just closed their tap room. You can still visit their brewery. The first three I mentioned are walkable, very walkable to each other. Widmer, Ecliptic, and Stormbreaker are within a mile, within half a mile maybe even, really close together. You go to close in southeast Portland, you can visit, see what's over there, Base Camp Brewing. That's right, Stormbreaker is the old Amnesia. Hair of the Dog, if you're visiting Portland for the first time, you have to go to Hair of the Dog. You just kind of have to. We have, what else is over there?
Hopworks on
Powell. Yeah. Hopworks on Powell, which I live about 3 blocks from. You might see me there. There all too often. The Commons Brewery is a nice little tap room. They make some excellent Belgian-style beers. They're close in. I can't remember the cross streets, but they're close in southeast. There'll probably be some other Portlanders popping on the list here soon that can throw out other ideas. Also, if you're just visiting Portland and want a nice smattering of choices, you can stop by one of the excellent tap rooms. And those include Belmont Station, Apex, which if it's a sunny day, there's no better place in town. Beer Mongers, and Bailey's Tap Room, all wonderful places. And yes, Cascade Barrel House, I don't know how I forgot that one. That is a no miss right there. That's they have some excellent sour beers. Well worth stopping by there and trying everything they have if you can then walk out of the place. Oh, that's fantastic. Yes, you do.
More breweries per capita than any other city in the world.
Although I think Bend might be giving us a run for our money. Yeah. Bend and I read once that Hood River, Oregon, tiny little Hood River has more breweries per capita than any other city in the world.
Cideries too.
Yeah, definitely. I think we have, gosh, I've lost count of the cideries that are open in town. I think at least half a dozen now.
Reverend Nats isn't very far from us.
Right? Yeah. Reverend Nats is excellent.
Bushwhackers?
Bushwhackers on Powell, yeah.
Yep.
And there are some that are just in production, like Cider Riot is in production now, but I don't think they would tap them up yet. Part of this program is that some of the students come out and visit Portland for a weekend, tour some fine facilities.
And see how well they could manage and get their home cells home in one piece?
Exactly, yeah. That's right, Cider Riot, you can find it all over town. Abe makes wonderful cider, and if you can find it, definitely try it. Thanks for reiterating that, Melly. We uploaded the PowerPoint for Janine today, and it didn't translate to the Canvas conferencing site very well. It's very muddled, as you'll see. So I would suggest going into the module, opening up that PSU Slides 3 file, and then you can more easily follow along. And if you're savvy enough, you can shrink it down and stick it over in the corner of your screen, and it won't interrupt your webinar experience at all. I don't know if I could figure that out, but I'm sure some of you can. If anyone has trouble finding that file, let me know, and I'll guide you to it. People will probably keep trickling on as we go, but we'll go ahead and start up at 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Hey, Ben. I've been busy for the World Cup. Get a lot of World Cup people in there.
I've been avoiding it because it's probably that busy. So
Yeah, sure it is.
staying away.
Did the renovation include kind of a sports pub element? Are there a lot of TVs in there?
A couple. I don't think there's any more than there were.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm sure it still draws the crowd out.
A lot more taps now.
Oh, damn. How many times?
Maybe
30
that
times.
many? Not quite that many. There's a lot. There's about 2 dozen or so.
With all different
Widmer beers.
Widmer beers.
Yeah. And cider.
Wow. I don't know if you guys heard that, but Widmer Brothers just did a renovation at their Gas House pub in Portland here, and I was just informed that there are somewhere around 2 dozen to 30 taps on at the Gas House now with all Widmer beers, so that's very exciting. Widmer beer and cider.
We had one of our old meads for the grand opening. We have about 2 kegs left of mead. We used one of them for the grand opening.
I was talking to Alan Taylor the other day.
Oh, okay.
Who told me about some of his experiences making mead at Widmer. That was all news to me.
Yes. We made Blue Raz.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Or the Blue Buzz. I think it's Blue Buzz. Marionberry mead concoction.
Oh, nice. Yeah. That guy makes good beer. That's another one I left off the list of. We were talking about Portland breweries a second ago. I think one of the best kept secrets in Portland is Little Pints Brewery in Old Town Portland, or maybe it's in Chinatown. I think it's Old Town. Right downtown, and it's this tiny little pub with good food offerings and fantastic beer, brewed by brewmaster Alan Taylor, who was formerly a brewer at Widmer.
I believe you left us.
All right, it's a little after 6 o'clock. I think we'll go ahead and get started. I think a few more people will probably trickle in, but we have a good number here. Welcome, everybody, to this third session of this course. And today we're going to be talking about a very important topic, which is TTB. A lot of times when I meet with new beverage clients, I start talking about TTB, they say, "What's the TTB?" And I say, you'll know soon enough, because it's going to be an important part of your life, both for the initial permitting process and then for the reporting process that we'll be talking about today. My guest tonight is Janine Grace, and Janine is at the Widmer Brothers, or the Craft Brew Alliance, which is Widmer, Red Hook, and Kona breweries. Plus, you guys have a cider.
Square Mile cider
now?
And Omission beer.
And Omission, gluten-free beer. So Janine is a regulatory specialist with Craft Brew Alliance. She previously worked as an investigator at the Northwest Field Office of the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, the TTB. During that time, she performed numerous product integrity investigations, initial and amended qualifications, audits of tax returns and reports, and investigated label and advertising compliance at breweries, wineries, and distilleries. She participated in various TTB-sponsored seminars, including presenting at and co-writing the handouts for the 2005 Northwest Field Office's Brewery Compliance Seminar. So she is a wonderful guest to have here because she has such a depth of knowledge, not only about TTB on the sort of regulatory side, but also on the practical side of dealing with these issues, working for a brewery that's very active in these applications and label approvals and those sorts of things. And if we have time, Janine's also going to share some of her experiences with alternating proprietorships, which her company does quite a few of. Hopefully you've watched the video by now on contract brewing and alternating proprietorships. I think she could lend some excellent practical advice to go along with that. So I'm going to let Janine guide this discussion, and I might pop in every now and then with questions, and please feel free to pop up on the screen with your own questions, and I will relay them over to her. But go ahead, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. A little strange not having a room full of people, but I guess I'll get used to this.
I can do your slides if you like. Let's see.
Let me do that. There we go. All right. Briefly, what we're going to cover is about a semester's worth of material in an hour. So I'm going to do the best that I can. I would appreciate questions. I'd rather this be more of a dialogue than me lecturing on a camera. So first, we're going to go over just some general things, a few helpful hints I've uncovered over the years. And then we're going to go through the brewer's notice application itself, see what all the materials are that are included in that. We're going to look at the brew pub and the brewer's report that needs to be sent in monthly or quarterly. And then the excise tax return, very important piece to TTB. Next slide. You should have somewhere in this mysterious computer thingy a 10-page document that is full of bullet points of my tips of the trade, I guess, that I've uncovered over the years.
You'll find that in the modules under week 3, under week 3 you'll be able to find it. Under there, I think it's titled, I can't remember off the top of my head what it's titled, but it's a pretty self-evident title, something like Tips for TTB or something like that.
Something like that.
Very useful. Definitely give it a read.
Way too long for me to go through here now, but if you open it up, you have any questions about it, let me know, and I'll try to answer them. But I will go over a couple of things that I think are really important. First of all, something to keep in mind with TTB, they're a little bit weird in a lot of ways because they got 2 different laws that they administer. So they have, for your licensing process, something called a basic permit or something called a registration. Some people will get one, some people will get the other, some people will get both. So for a brewery, you do not get a basic permit. You get a registration, which is called the brewer's notice. And that's something we're going to go through later. It's, telling them all about what you're going to do as a brewery. They approve that you're a brewer. If you are a winery or a distillery, and that includes cideries, you're going to need both the basic permit and a registration. So I don't have time to go over the wine or distillery part today, but when you go to do your application, you're going to have the 2 different pieces, the basic permit and your registration.
And the same types of information are needed for these
similar types, different forms. You can do the paper application, which is what I'm going to show you for technical reasons. It was just easier to show you the papers. But what you really want to do is permits online. They also call it PONL, P-O-N-L. Relatively new, a little bit clunky to get yourself started on it, get all your information input in it, but it is far better because once you've submitted it, you know where it is. You go in there, figure out which specialist has it on their desk. You can figure out how to get a hold of them. If they have questions, they can email you, and it goes quite a bit quicker. So please use that if you can. Another thing to keep in mind is if you start on paper, at this point, all your changes have to be done on paper. If you start online, everything is done online. So because we started back before the system, we have to continue doing paper until they can update their computer system.
And you'll find on the TTB website that they push you towards the permits online system. Yes. It's becoming very difficult to even find those paper forms.
Yeah, they're trying to hide the forms. Now, my second page, if any of you have the little bullet point saying open. The next page is on ways to enter the industry as a manufacturer. And this is where I talk a little bit about alternating proprietorships, contract brewing, alternating premises. There's kind of three basic ways you can go into this. You could be a traditional standalone brewery where you have your own building, your own licensing, your own paperwork, your own everything, your own building, your own entity. That's very expensive, especially for startups. So there's a couple of other ways to enter this industry without having all that cash outlay in the beginning. One is to do contract brewing, or in the wine world they call it custom crush, where you hire somebody else to do the work for you. They make the beer, they make the wine, the cider, or whatever, and then you buy it from them already packaged and you sell it to your wholesalers or retailers. In that case, the entity that makes it, they have all the licensing to produce, and you get a TTB basic permit for a wholesaler, which is actually pretty easy to get. And then whatever state you're in is going to have different requirements.
Christian had a question here real
Yes.
quick, just going back to discussion on the applications. You have to fill out both applications if you're planning on making both beer and cider.
Yes, you will.
You'll be getting to that pretty soon.
I just about to that section. If you're making beer and cider in the same building, you'll be an alternating premise, and that's mentioned briefly at the bottom of the second page of my notes. We do that. We have a winery permit and we have a brewer's notice in the same building. We alternate back and forth, and what that means is today this particular tank has beer in it, so it's brewery. Tomorrow that same tank has cider in it, it's now winery premise, and you have to flip back and forth. Not all states allow this at this point, and some of the states are a little bit funky on how they do it, but for TTB, you get both, so you have to do the brewery notice, the basic permit for wine, and the wine registration. Now, if you're going to be making beer in somebody else's facility, which we do right now, we recently opened up a facility in Memphis. We're in a building that is owned by City Brewing, and there's maybe 5 or 6 different breweries that are operating out of that building. That's called an alternating proprietorship, or an alt prop for short. Great way to get into the industry without having the money for your own building or your equipment. In this case, you have your own brewer's notice, you do all your own paperwork, taxes, label approvals, you do everything on your own except own the building and the equipment. It's a bit more of an administrative burden, there's additional paperwork required, but it's a pretty common way to actually get yourself started. The next page I talk about bonds. This is probably, from the TTB's perspective, the most important thing that you have. I have a question about the alt prop.
Can you operate a tap room in an alt prop?
Yes, you can. Somebody will have to be responsible for it. You don't alternate the tap room, but if there's a place for it, that could be your permanent premise, and you can have that as your tap room.
And some of that's going to be based on state law too.
Yes.
You have to make sure your state allows that.
So back to the bond. That is to protect the tax liability if you, for whatever reason, don't bother to pay your taxes. TTB can come after your bond to get your tax money back. And so that's why they think of this as the super important document that you need to have. If you don't have it, or if you don't have enough, they can come knocking on your door and say stop operating altogether. And one quick note about the bond, a little known piece of information. A couple years ago, TTB decided that if you're qualified to file your reports and taxes quarterly, which would be small startups, you only need a minimum $1,000 bond. You don't need to get a larger bond, which they used to require. So keep that in mind as you get started. You might see some old information about calculating it at 19% of your taxes and all this stuff. Up until the end of next year, you just need a $1,000 bond if you can file quarterly. They will probably extend it indefinitely. So we had a question about sort of a sublet.
For the tap room and an alternating proprietorship. I guess it could be seen as a sublet now.
Yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah, you want that to be a part of your contract for sure.
Yes.
Between you and the host producer. So yeah, you basically are going to be subletting that.
Mm-hmm. So I've got some other stuff in here on taxes and filing, which we'll be covering in details in a moment. Trade practices, you can spend easily a semester on trade practices. I can't even begin to get into that. The bond going to change. Is that for an alt crop? Sure, I understand Pat's question.
Maybe you can clarify your question a little bit. You can keep chatting
Keep
until
going.
it pops up.
Label approvals, don't have time for that. I don't have time for formulas. But late breaking news, 2 weeks ago, TTB has decided that a bunch of beer ingredients that are now traditional ingredients no longer require formula. There's a notice on TTB's website about that. So now if you're making pumpkin beer, raspberry beer, barrel aging in bourbon barrels, things like that, no more formula. Yay.
It's huge for a lot of people.
Huge. It took 8 years. 8 years. Yeah, okay.
Expiration of it.
The expiration, this minimum bond for the quarterly filers, right now it's through December 31st of 2015. They should announce at some point whether that's going to be extended or whether they're going to stop it. So I don't really know right now, but I expect sometime before December of 2015 for TTB to announce what they're going to do. And as for ciders, no, unfortunately, they did not change the cider formula rules. So if you needed a formula for cider before, you still need it. And we do on ours. We put hops in one of ours, so sorry. I do have in here on page 8 of these handouts a whole section on cider. I'm surprised how complicated the cider industry actually is. Every state seems to have a different idea whether it's wine or beer or what it is, whether it's liters or barrels or whatnot. Probably the most important thing for you to know about cider and TTB is that it's a wine. It is not beer. Just because it's sold with the beers and it looks like beer because it's in a beer bottle, it's a wine. If you're going to make cider, you need a wine basic permit, you pay the wine tax rates, you file wine reports, stuck with the wine formula rules.
And that's regardless of how your state treats
Yes.
cider.
Yeah.
Your state might call it a beer or a malt beverage, but TTB is always going to be wine.
Yep. It's good luck going from state to state to state on that one. That's a trip. But, you know, I like cider. It's good stuff. And then on the final page of my handouts, a lot of resources that you can go to. The TTB website, if you haven't been there yet, please visit it. I'm surprised for a government agency just how much helpful information they have.
Definitely.
They have the handouts from the old beer seminar that I helped write. They've got some tutorials. They've got stuff on how to fill out the reports. Lots of really good information, so go there. All right, moving on to the next slide.
So here we're getting into these the difficult to read brewer's notice applications. So this is where you want to pull up that PowerPoint that we posted and follow along on the separate screen.
And I understand that not everyone here is interested in beer. Some of you are looking at cider, wine, or spirits. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all of that. I will tell you that although the forms are different and some of the questions are different when you do it online, but the information is very similar. So whether you're doing beer, cider, spirits, they're going to want diagrams, they're going to want bonds, they're going to know your personal histories, the environmental form, water quality form. Those are going to be the same. And the basic application for wine and spirits, it's the same application, you just check a different box on that. So similar.
For your homework assignment, you're going to be floating around through the TTB site, and you'll find that, like Janine said, it's very helpful. It has a list of all the forms just right there. These are all the forms you're going to need to apply to be a distillery, to be a winery. It lays it out very specifically, and then when you go on the online application, it's also laid out very well. So it guides you through the process.
Yeah. The nice thing about online is it responds to what you tell it. So if you say you're going to be a winery, it's going to start asking you wine questions. So you'll know what to answer because it will tell you. So what you're seeing now, if you can actually see it, hopefully you can, is an actual brewer's notice application. This is the one we use to open our Memphis alternating proprietorship. So this is the real deal. before we submitted it. That's why you've got all the blue fill-it-in marks here. Top portion, pretty simple. You're just putting in your basic contact information, where your facilities are, whatnot. Towards the middle, they're asking a little bit about what your operations are. So you'll be telling them whether you're a brewery or a brew pub. Keep in mind, what is a brew pub depends on whether you're talking to TTB or your state. They could be different definitions. Brew pub for the feds does not depend on size, and I know a lot of states, a brew pub is a smaller size. So with TTB, it's just, you've got a tap room, you've got a tavern, some place where you're serving beer and food. That makes you a brew pub for the feds. Then you put in, what type of business entity you are, your EIN number, which if you haven't applied for, apply for that, because you'll need that before you can deal with the states or TTB.
Or banks, or basically
banks,
anybody.
Yeah, get that first. And then they want to know who owns the material, the equipment, and the building. Because this was an alternating proprietorship, you could see that that's the name of the host, the Blue City Brewery, owns all of the facilities that we're using there. And then there's this peculiar question about your business hours. That's not your hours that you're open for business. That's not the hours that you're making beer. That is, what is your day? You know how there's calendar year and fiscal year? Well, there's normal day, and then there's business day, should you choose to not start and end your day at midnight. I don't know why you would do that. Just, if you're a normal person and you're starting and ending at midnight, just leave that blank. Be enough there. And then you're going to tell them why you're applying. And if you're the very first one, you're obviously going to check that first box and say, I'm establishing myself as a brewery for the first time. When you go to change something later, you're going to check the second box, say you're making an amendment, and check one of the boxes below it to explain why. Say you're adding a trade name, you check the box to add your trade name. The next little section is about control groups. Probably won't apply to you. This is when you've got more than one brewery under the same ownership. We've got 6, so we do check that we are one. You'll most likely check you're not a control group. And the very bottom pertains to your tax rate. They want to know how much beer you anticipate making, so they know whether you're charged the $7 or the $18. Probably starting up, you're going to make less than 60,000 barrels, so that's the box you'll probably check. The back side of it, you put your EIN at the top again, so when they lose the second page, they can bring it back to the first page, because they do lose things. I hit TTB. And then you've got this signing authority section. There's 2 ways to handle your signing authority. You could fill this out here on your brewer's notice, or there's a separate sheet of paper you can use, and I will show you the separate sheet of paper in a minute, because that's what we're using. What the signing authority is for is to tell TTB this is who can sign my documents, and this is who you can talk to about my business. If someone's name is not listed either as a signing authority or a power of attorney, TTB is not supposed to talk to them about what you're doing and not accept any paperwork from these people. Signing authority, you could apply by title, so you could say whoever is my president, secretary, and treasurer, they get to sign. If you're wanting an individual by name, you'll do the power of attorney form, and I'll show you that in a second. We have a brew pub section. If you said you're going to be a brew pub, you're going to check off these little boxes here, mostly just saying, yep, I'm going to follow the rules, I'm going to do what you tell me. And then there's a section on attachments. Brewer's notice itself, 2 pages. All the accompanying documents, you're going to get a nice chunk stack. So check off everything that you're going to be sending in. One of the great things about doing it online is when you get towards the end, they're going to give you a list, everything they want. And it's more that's what's included in here, which saves you from having them come back to you and say, well, you forgot to do this. I'm like, well, it doesn't say it on the little form. Mm-hmm. Online, they'll tell you what to include.
And it's super simple. It allows you just to upload that document. Most of them can be just uploaded. There are a couple of documents that you have to send in, an actual original signed document, but
most of it you
just upload.
Yeah. And then someone with signing authority signs the bottom. Add all your attachments, mail it in, or hit your little send button on Permits Online. So the next few pages are just some examples to remind you of things that need to go with this.
Sorry. Yeah.
You're going to need to send in some sort of organizational documents depending on what type of entity you are. We're a corporation, so we submit our articles of incorporation and our bylaws. This is just a front page of our articles of incorporation reminding you to put that in there. If you're an LLC, you'll have the LLC formation documents, partnership agreement,
Articles of organization or certificate of organization, depending on your state.
So you'll include that. You will need to show something that says you do exist in the state where you're doing business if you're required to register. Obviously, corporation we do. Don't send in one that's with the wrong corporation with a 5-year-old date on it, which is what you're looking at right now. For the most part, these certificates of existence are only good for about 60 days. So we've been known to have to keep buying new ones from the state of Washington. If you're lucky, you're in a state that you can get them for free.
In some states, it takes a little while to get these documents once you order them. So pay attention to that. Call your Secretary of State or look it up online and see how long that process is going to take.
Yeah. Also, you need, depending on what state you are in, need to register your trade names if you're using a name different than your corporate or LLC name. And so if that is the case, then you'll need to send in that paperwork as well to TTB so they know your name is registered. You're also going to want to know who's in charge. So as a corporation, we have officers and directors, which we change as often as you change your stocks. So this is our most recent list of officers. We also have a list of directors that get sent in. If you're an LLC, you'll have your list of members and managers that you'll need to send in so they know who's accountable to the company. And if you are one of those paranoid types who does not trust the government and doesn't want people to have your personal information, I suggest you stop now. Don't go forward. Don't go any further. Because TTB is going to require that all of your owners who have more than 10% ownership in your company, all officers, directors, LLC managers, members, partners in a partnership, everybody needs to fill in this personal history questionnaire. It's pretty personal. They're going to do criminal background checks. They're going to look at your finances. They will probably want copies of bank statements, loan documents. They're going to ask a lot of information about you. Some of the states are worse. The state of Washington will want personal information on your spouse, including your spouse's social security number. Handful of states will require fingerprints. So be prepared to reveal a lot of information about yourself. And this one can also be done online. When you go into permits online, when you're starting out an application, they'll ask, are you doing a brewery, are you doing a winery, what are you doing? One of the options is owner-officer information. So instead of doing this form, you could do it online. Do whatever you think is best that you trust this personal information. Obviously, if someone gets a hold of this, they could steal your identity. So if you feel comfortable sending it electronically, do that. You can mail or fax it in. I would personally never fax this because goodness knows where it could land. You hit the wrong number. Registered certified mail, you could send it in that way if that's the way you feel comfortable doing it.
And just to point out one practical note on this, because these applications take so much time and everybody's always in a hurry to get up and going, it's a good idea to get started on things like this early on, especially if you have some investors that you're going to need to get this information from. Request it from them early, get them to go online, fill out their form if they're going to do it online, but have them do it early so that you're not waiting on other people so that you can submit your application.
That's usually our last thing. Part of Anheuser-Busch is part of our company and chasing them down. That's fun. So it's about a 5-page document. I put it all in here just to let you see. The first page is just some general personal information. There it goes. Information about your criminal history and your history in the industry. Do be honest on this. If you lie and they do your background criminal check and find out that you didn't tell the truth about your criminal history, you're just done. You're done. They will turn you down right away for that.
And would you say that criminal history is one of the areas that applications are denied most often for? Is it one of the if you have a criminal history particularly connected with the alcohol industry, that could be a roadblock for
that
you.
is definitely a roadblock.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it happen much because I think people are self-selecting out.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, most of what I see people rejected for is they're just missing information and haven't turned it in on time.
Right.
But yeah, well, we have seen some strange things. I've seen some weird financial issues. We had someone who was from Cuba, obviously came to the country illegally. It's the only way you can go. So his money was strange, but surprisingly, we cleared him. He was fine once we understood the situation.
Yep.
Then they're going to want employment history, and I can't read what the bottom of the thing is. Something interesting at the bottom. Oh, commercial credit. If you have a credit rating, they want to know about that. And I think the next page we get your residence history. I mean, it feels like a job application. Where did you work in the last 10 years? Where did you live in the last 10 years? And then they want financial information. So if you invested money, if this is your investor putting it in there, explain where it came from, and don't be surprised if they come back and say, can I see 6 months of bank statements to verify the source of funds. And then the final page are your references. The first one has to be a bank reference. This is where you're banking. And then it's like your job application, whoever your professional or character references are, you'll put them in there. They probably will be called, not necessarily, but a lot of times they will call. I know who these people are.
Janine, in what situations do you have to, if information from this form changes, in what situations do you have to report those changes?
Information on the form, if you change your name, you would change it. And that, I don't think you have to redo the form itself. You would submit a notice to them. Anyone do that.
Yeah.
But you submit like a letterhead notice and say, hey, my name is now different, so they have it on record. If someone has any sort of legal trouble, if someone gets arrested for something relating to taxes or alcohol, I don't think they care so much about drunk driving.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's some other criminal activity, you absolutely have to notify that person may be disqualified from being an owner, right, or officer at your company. I think that's probably the biggest thing. Also, if someone changes the amount of ownership, if you've got someone who only owns 9% now, they don't have to submit this paperwork. But if they put in some more money, buy a little bit of additional stock, and now they've got 10.5%, you need to get this form done and get that submitted within 30 days so they can get cleared.
Yep. And this is one of those areas that relates back to entity formation too. It's a good idea because the status of your owners can change your ability to have a TTV permit. Make sure that if it gets into too much trouble, you can get them out of your company, yes, so that they're not holding you back from being properly permitted.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's the personal history part. Now we get to something a little bit more fun. You're going to have to submit, and this is true for wineries, distilleries, and breweries. You need to submit your premise diagram, a description of the premise, and a security statement. I hope your description and diagram are not as bad as this. This is an actual Portland facility with multi-layers and windows and cutouts and weird stuff. What's really important about this, and if you can kind of see it, if you've got the good slides pulled up, there's a red line around things, and in our particular case, that red line is your bonded line. That's what's really important here. Your bond is tied to a particular piece of property, and anything that's required to happen on bonded premise has to be inside that red line. You can't be doing it outside of that line somewhere. If it's not allowed on bonded premise, don't do it inside the red line. Do it outside the red line. And we have some funny little carve-outs. If you were to look at this in detail, you'd see that the red line carves out a few weird places. That's when we're storing stuff tax paid. We needed to remove that from the bond. The bond can also be extended to outside. It doesn't have to be building itself. And this is really common for wineries that will bond their entire premise, or they'll bond the crush pad, which is outside. It can be outdoors if you want to, and we do have a couple of sections here that the loading dock is outdoors and we did bond with. That's all I need to say about that.
I have a quick question for you on this, Janine. in a lot of situations I've encountered, you have a new beverage company who's getting into a new space. They lease that space, and in the interim, as soon as they get into the lease, they're filing for their brewer's permit. They're getting all this information together, sending it in, but maybe they don't have their floor plan ready yet. Is this something that you can submit later on, or can you submit just a rough draft of your floor plan and amend it later?
I would submit a rough draft, and this is where things get really sticky. Even if you're doing it online, it takes at least 3 months, sometimes 4, 5, 6 months to get approval. If you do what TTP tells you to do, you have everything set up, ready to go, you submit your paperwork, and then you wait 3 months and do nothing. We understand that it's not real, that's not how it works. Even when I worked at TTP, I understood that was an issue. So submit the best case that you understand. If you don't have all of your equipment, sometimes you could just submit an invoice saying, yeah, I've purchased this tank, it's coming, and they will accept that. Once you've actually made the final changes, submit your amendment. And we change this thing all the time, about once a year or so. We make a change to it, and we submit a new diagram.
And don't forget to submit those amendments. Beverage companies are always expanding, buying new stuff. Mm-hmm. Make sure to submit your diagrams showing how things are changing as you progress.
Yes. The brewer's notice and the wine and distilled spirits registrations, you number them serially. So your first one's number 1, and when you do your next amendment, it's number 2, et cetera, et cetera. Our Portland facility, we started again at 1 in 2008, and I think we're on number 19.
Wow.
So yeah, we change a lot.
Can you give folks some idea of how often inspections take place with TTB, how often they hop in and take a look at things?
With a larger facility like ours, they kind of have a 3-year cycle, and that's about what we've been getting, is about 3 to 4 years. With smaller facilities, it's more hit or miss. Sometimes, because the National Revenue Center in Cincinnati is actually who handles the applications, they can handle it for you, and then someone out at the field might say, oh, we need to check some of these new places that have cropped up. We're going to pick a few of them and go do an after application investigation. Other than that, it's if you're at high risk, if you happen to just be, your straw was drawn that year, someone complained. Mm-hmm. So the smaller places don't see them that often.
So it doesn't mean you shouldn't be in compliance.
Yes, because
take your chance.
Yeah, what happened when I came on board, it was right after the split between TTB and ATF, and ATF hadn't been paying attention to the industry. So people had not seen anyone for ATF for 10, 15 years, and all of a sudden TTB shows up, and it was ugly. It was so ugly. Where to purchase a bond? Very good question. The bond, you have three choices. You can do cash, you can do a treasury note, or you can buy a surety bond, which is what we do. And for the surety bond, somewhere on TTB's website, and I'm not sure where, but somewhere on there they do list what companies can actually issue bonds. They do approve the surety companies that issue them. We go to an insurance agent, so the same agency that handles our liability insurance and all our other forms of insurance, they handle our bonds as well. In my head, I don't remember the name of our company.
We're going to have a guest on next week for the live session who's an insurance agent, and he's going to actually be talking about, he does the same thing. He provides bonds for beverage companies, so he'll be talking about that, the resources available there as well.
Yeah. And we have the actual company that covers us is Hartford. We've used Travelers in the past. No particular reason changed. Okay. Next slide. Okay, environmental and water quality forms. These are the forms that I hand to our engineering department and say, can you tell me what to put on here, because I don't understand any of this. This is kind of almost related to EPA stuff. I'm honestly not sure what TTB does with this, but they're looking for, there are concerns about pollution, noise, where your waste going. So you fill out these forms. They're pretty self-explanatory. They want to know what you're doing with your garbage, and what is your heat and your power supplier. What are your pollution control, things like that. It's pretty simple. I don't think anything on here really get someone disapproved. Sometimes they come back and ask questions to understand what you're doing. You know, if you've got your must and you're throwing it out on your farm, then they might have questions about that, but it's pretty straightforward.
My clients always ask me, how detailed should you be in these sections? And I usually just tell them, err on the side of being overly detailed.
Yep, that's what we do.
Bore them with information, and they'll probably won't come back and ask you any more questions.
Yeah, the people who review these aren't going to understand it any more than I do. And I just, we can go through these pretty quickly. The environmental form is a 2-page document, so that's the front. And then the back, a couple more questions on here about noise in the water. And the water form is just a one-side page. One quirk about this supplemental water form, that very first box that asks for your form number, people don't understand what that is because TTP doesn't bother to explain it. That number is the number of the registration application that you're filling out. So that 5130.10, I think it is on there. That's the form number of a brewer's notice form, and you'll find that at the very bottom of your brewer's notice form. If you're doing wine or spirits, you'll have to find that number. If you do it online, through Permits Online, they're not going to ask, so don't worry about it. But if you're doing it on paper and you're scratching your head, what is that number? It's the number of the first notice form. All right, I mentioned earlier on the second page of the brewer's notice, there's a section at the top for signing authority. If you don't do it on there, here's the actual form for doing that. This independent form you also will use for winery, cidery, distillery, because it's not on the application itself the way it is for breweries. This is still our active document. It's quite ancient. It's from 2008. Very hard to read. But that's we just listed on the officer titles of officers who get the ability to sign, and we just keep using the same form for every application we do. And then we get power of attorney. This is something that you would use if you want one of your employees to handle stuff, which is how we work. If you want your lawyer, or you have an accountant, you have a consulting firm, someone who's doing work for you to help you with your business who needs to talk to TTP or sign their forms, you do the power of attorney form. You can do this as a blanket power of attorney, which is that big section in the middle. I think it's number 8. If you leave it as it is, on what I show you, that gives you full power of attorney. So this is my power of attorney form for our Memphis operation. I can do anything I want there. They trust me for some reason. Or you can cross off that paragraph in the middle, and then in the section below, where that big blank section is, you can say what this person's allowed to do. So we have a person who can only do label and formula approvals. We have a couple of people who only do taxes and reports. We have someone who only does export paperwork. So you can restrict this to whatever you want this person to do. And then as for signing it, it's a little funny where you sign it. The signature of appointed attorney, that's the person you're giving authority to. So since this was my form, I would sign there. Then at the bottom, there's a single line. If you're sole proprietorship, the sole proprietor would sign there. Otherwise, those lines at the bottom, you'll have an officer or a member, somebody sign. They give you 4 lines. We've only ever signed it once with one person, and that works. And then if you have a corporate seal, you put your seal there, or you put the little X where it says you don't have a seal.
If I remember correctly, this is one of those documents you have to file an original of.
Yeah, I think they might have changed to that, but we've been
really?
filing originals.
Yeah,
yep.
I've always filed originals,
Yeah.
and I think have to be notarized as well.
Yeah, on the back here, you have 3 choices. You either notarize it, or you have 2 witnesses sign it, or you have an attorney or a CPA sign it. You don't have to do all 3 of these. I recommend you have a notary handy. I'm a notary. One of my coworkers is a notary, and one of our accountants is a notary. There's a lot of forms that we deal with that require notarization. At least here in Oregon, it was really easy to do. Just an online course. You take a little test, and you get your notary stuff in the mail. So it's not a bad idea to have a notary on hand to sign stuff.
You can always go to a law office or a bank. Usually you can find a notary in-house.
Or you just have 2 witnesses sign it.
Yep.
That works too. Write your bond. Like I said, this is probably your most important piece of paper. We keep these locked up so we do not lose them. Even though TTP has a copy, we get a little bit paranoid. If you don't have this, if it's not enough coverage, literally TTP will send you a cease and desist letter. So do keep an eye on this. I fill out the top of it myself with the address information and whatnot. And then I send it to our broker who fills out most of the bottom for us. We tend to negotiate between us, well, what do we want the execution date to be? Usually it's whatever date she's signing it. Sometimes I'm doing it well in advance, and so I pick a date in the future. But it's usually, okay, whatever day you're signing it, let's execute it now. We're not filing for another month, but the bond is in place. When she's done, she puts a power of attorney form and a couple other forms onto it. In duplicate, we get two originals, sends it back to us. I have an officer sign it, and then you either put your bird seal on there if you have one, or you get the two witnesses to sign it. And this is another one where they want the actual original. The wine and spirits forms are very similar, very important. Same idea, you fill out what you can, send it to your broker, and they take care of the rest and give it back to you for signature.
Is there a rule of thumb as far as when you want to check in on your bond amount and when you want to evaluate whether you should increase that amount?
I do it every year. Our company does forecasting of financials in around November. So I go to our treasury person and ask what are our predictions for what we plan on making in the next year, and then I calculate our coverage, and then I go well above it, because if you're successful and you grow fast, you can very easily exceed your coverage. I found out with our cider, we started making a cider a year ago, had minimal coverage. Business picked up a few months later, I increased the coverage, and then we changed the way we made cider. Instead of making it a little bit at a time throughout the year like we had originally planned, we made the better part of the years all at once. And all of a sudden, our bond coverage just went through the roof. So we went from $5,000 coverage to $50,000 coverage, because I got a little panic, and all of a sudden, it's all here now. So if you're changing the way you operate, if you're growing, if you add new tanks, anything that increases your capacity, those are also times you want to look at that and get as much extra as you can afford.
Nice.
And this next document you may or may not need. This is the change in bond form, also known as consent of surety. This is to make certain types of alterations to your original bond. The most often time that you will need this is if you're doing an alternating proprietorship or an alternating premise. Then you'll need the consent of surety in order to do the alternation. And this is the one we use for our Memphis alt prop. The wording in there, I think, probably came off TTV's website. I don't remember where we got that from. It's kind of the official wording, what you say, why you're doing this. And just like the other bond, you fill in the top part, send it to your broker, and they'll handle the rest and give it back to you for signature. Any questions about the application process before we move on to reports?
The question here is the bond is based on volume.
Oh, good question. For beer, it is based, the way they calculate it is you figure out how much beer you plan to make during the year in your volume. Then you figure out how much tax would be on that based on your tax rates. If you're small, it'll be $7, and then you take 10% of that. So if you are planning to make 10,000 barrels, you pay $7 a barrel on that. That's $70,000. 10% of that, $7,000.
So you can see why that number is could be a moving target if you're expanding rapidly.
Yes. Wine is a little bit different. It's still based on volume, but what they're doing is they're saying, well, what's the biggest volume you expect to have at any given point in the year? Which for a traditional grape winery will probably be in the fall, right after crush. You take that biggest volume, figure out what your tax would be on that volume, and that's what you get for your coverage. And then there's a deferral coverage, which you add on to that. Distilleries, I still quite frankly a little bit lost about their coverage, a little complicated. So you might want to call TTV or someone else to help you figure out, but it's based on your volume.
What's the consequence of not having sufficient bonding?
Worst case scenario, they tell you to cease and desist until you get a new bond in place. You can also be forced to tax pay more often, so you have less of a tax liability. Usually they'll start out nice and send you a letter and say your bond coverage is not sufficient and give you a few weeks to get it fixed.
Pay attention to those letters. I've actually seen breweries where that letter slides past, they don't do anything about it, and then they get that cease and desist, and you want to see a brewer freak out, tell them you can't make beer anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want to go there. All right, so on to the reports. There are two different reports that a brewer could have to file to TTV. One is the brew pub report, which is what you're seeing here, and the other is the brewery report. In order to file the brew pub report, you are not allowed to package any of your beer. You can fill growlers, but you can't bottle or keg it to sell. And you have to make less than 50,000 or 5,000 barrels a year. So if you're small and you're not packaging, you can do this much simpler brew pub report, and you'll see in a second why I say much simpler, because whoa, is it simpler. It's filed quarterly. This is the bulk of it right here. Very short, very quick. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but you should have in your materials an explanation for where this information came from, and you can follow them back and forth and see where I got these numbers. Left-hand side is your addition, so the first line you produced by fermentation. That's, hey, I made this beer, here I am, this is what I've made. And then the second column is what you removed. The first line on there is what you sold that you owe taxes on. That's an important number because that's what your taxes are on. And then you tasting and losses and things like that go on there. Total it up at the bottom. Pretty straightforward. I like this one. Mm-hmm. Then there's a little bit more on here. They want you to summarize your tax returns. So you're going to say, okay, I filed these taxes, on this date, and this is how much tax I paid. Pretty simple there. And then they want to know about your materials. Please don't laugh at the ridiculous numbers I have on here. I have no idea how much beer you'd really make with this amount of barley and hops, but they're round numbers. They looked good. Fill in your real numbers. Sign at the bottom. There's a little bit on the back that you may never ever use. Next slide. It's going to ask about cereal beverages. That's near beer. Anheuser-Busch makes near beer, and that's all I know about who makes near beer. So you'll probably never do that. But the remarks section, if you've got something funky you need to explain, go ahead and put it on the remarks section. That's the brew pub. Yay!
Easy.
Easy. Here's the brewer's report. If you're bottling, if you're kegging, if you make more than 5,000 barrels, you need to do this one. It can be filed quarterly or monthly, depending on your size. And you can see this one I filled out as if it were a quarterly report. And now you're going to see why I say this one's a lot worse. This is the top half. It's convoluted. It's not the easiest thing in the world to figure out. But go ahead and, when you get a chance, compare this to my little notes, figure out where the lines come from. And then for more information, go on to TTV's website. They do have a color-coded form that it also has its own little explanation, kind of like what I wrote up. And then they've got little color coding because this is balancing out and cells have to match and coordinate and all that stuff. And it shows you how it all works. And it's actually a pretty good explanation.
It is, yeah.
So this top half is your additions to inventory. The bottom half is your removals. Lines 14 and 15. At the top of this section here, that's what you're going to be paying your taxes on. So those are very important. You also pay taxes on inventory shortages. So there's a little line 31 there. You pay taxes on that too. And then the back side is essentially the same as what the brew pub report. As you sign it, you list your tax payments. You have the ridiculous numbers of how much hops and barley you used, cereal beverage, and then remarks if you've got, if something went wrong. If some number didn't make any sense and you want to explain it, go ahead and do that. One thing I should mention is just like the permits can be done online, you can do this online. It's a system called pay.gov. You have to apply to get into it, so apply as soon as you get your brewer's notice approved. Go ahead and apply. It could take a while to get in, so you will have to do it on paper until you get to the electronic version. Why do we do have an inventory show? Because we don't know how to count inventory.
It happens.
It happens more months than not. People miss inventory. They forget to count something that gets sold. They break a case with a forklift and don't write it down. It happens a lot. Thirsty brewers.
Thirsty brewers.
We had a small cooler where the sales and marketing staff would go in and get their samples, and they weren't supposed to do that because we were supposed to write it down somewhere. So we locked the door. They came in and took the hinges off.
Wow. That's a great question. If a batch has to be written off and dumped for quality control, you still have to pay taxes.
No, you don't. You can take beer for lab samples that you test either on-site or at an off-site lab that you do not have to pay taxes on. If it's destroyed either on-site or off-site, you do not have to pay taxes. Under certain circumstances, you can have some for your home use. Doesn't work for a corporation, but for I think partnerships and sole proprietorships, you can bring some of the home not to have to pay taxes. Exports, you don't pay taxes.
That's an important one to know.
Yeah.
What about beer that has been tax paid and then is destroyed later on for some reason?
What you need to do in that case is if it got destroyed like by accident and you found out after it got destroyed, get all the documentation you can, and then you're going to send in a claim to TTV with pictures and a description of what happened, and then they will allow you to deduct that tax amount from your next tax payment. If you know in advance it needs to be destroyed, if you've got a wholesaler who's got some bad beer and they're going to destroy it, have them hold it, and 2 weeks in advance, you need to send in a notice to TTV asking for permission to destroy it. Once you get that permission back, send that to your wholesaler. They destroy it. They send you an affidavit confirming, yes, I destroyed it on this date, and then you file a tax claim with TTV, and then they'll allow you to get your taxes back.
Another situation where you can get taxes back is if you have tax-paid beer that you export to another country, you can file documentation to get a refund on those taxes.
Yes.
For credit.
Or not pay it at all, depending on how
Right.
you do it, because most of ours go straight out without paying.
Sure.
And then the tax return. Unfortunately, for those of you who are into cider or spirits, don't do the reports on that. I know for the wine ones, there's a good tutorial on TTV's website on that. Spirits, I don't know the tutorial's very good. There's actually 3 monthly reports you have to do for spirits. They're kind of complicated, so you probably want to find someone at TTV who can help you out, or someone who's done it before. That's pretty complicated.
And for spirits, there's actually I haven't been all the way through it yet, but there's actually a presentation that TTV has posted online, a PowerPoint presentation. It's about 50 pages long, and it goes through quite a bit of material on the traps that distillers can fall into. Mm-hmm. So just get on TTV and see what information they have. It's really a treasure of information.
The excise tax return, this is the same no matter what your commodity. In fact, you'll see in a moment it includes cigarettes. Default is you pay twice a month unless you're qualified to pay quarterly if you're small enough. Wine, if you're really small, you can pay it annually. Top part, fill it in, that's pretty standard. And then in the middle of the form, this is where you say, hey, I'm paying this amount of tax on beer or this amount of tax on wine, spirits, cigars, what have you. So you fill that in, you total it, and then at the bottom are increasing and decreasing adjustments. This is if increasing adjustment, let's say you forgot to pay the taxes on something last month, you missed it, we did that recently ourselves. You can go in there and say, oops, I forgot to pay the tax on it, here's the tax amount I'm going to pay, and then you add that at the top. Decreasing adjustment, that would be, say, it did get destroyed off-site somewhere and you've got your claim form back, you fill it in here and say, claim form number such and such, I'm getting this amount of tax back, you subtract it from the amount that you're going to be paying. And that's your tax form. Again, pay.gov, you can do that online. My contact information here. If you have questions, go ahead and shoot me an email. It's the best way to get a hold of me.
We have about 3 minutes left in our class, so if you have any questions you want to pop up on the screen, please do so now As you've noticed, Janine is a wealth of information on this subject. So you may be at the point where you don't even know what your questions are yet, and that's understandable. But you will have questions down the line. Trust me, it can become a complicated process. But once you figure out the process and start filing your quarterlies, it becomes a pretty easy part of your administration, but an important part, especially the TCB considered to be quite important.
Yes, keep them off your back. Be nice to them. Keep the animal happy.
And that's another thing when you're. Not only is the website helpful, but I've actually found the TTP personnel to be extremely helpful. A lot of times you'll call up a government agency, especially at the federal level, and you just won't get a lot of help. These people are extremely helpful. They're very busy people, but their job is to help you through these processes, and they do a great job at it.
Yeah.
When you're going through the permitting process, talk to your person who's been assigned to your case. See what that person needs. Walk through the application with them. They'll be helpful, and they'll want to help you get through the application so they can get it off their desk, get you your approval, and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Just want to give any advice for people who, when they're in the approval process, for making the process go faster. Any advice for expediting that process?
Give them as much information as you can in the beginning. Find out who that person is, and like I said, if you do it online, you can find out who has it. Reach out to them and find out what they need. Sometimes they'll ask you for odd stuff that you wouldn't expect. Get it to them as soon as possible. Get them on the phone if you need to and talk through it. Sometimes if you're in a hurry, you can go to someone up in the top and beg and plead. I've gone to Diane Matt, supervisor in Beer, many times and said, look, we need to have this done by this date. What can we do? They've actually been pretty good. I'm surprised how many times.
Probably helps that you used to work there.
Yes.
I've found that if you think things are lagging a little bit on your approvals, call a person up and ask them for the status. And I found that often they say, it's the next one on my desk, next one on my stack, and you'll have a response back from them the next day. So the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Don't be polite, be considerate. They're busy people, but call them up every now and then, see how things are going with your application. Somebody was asking if it takes 6 months to get approval.
Yeah, permits online, they'll actually tell you on the website what their average is right now.
It's usually about 90 to 110, 120 days.
Yeah, it's about 3 months, but that's if everything goes well. So what I've seen, when it takes 6 months, it's either a paper application, which will take longer, or there's a lot of back and forth. Things aren't right, you haven't perfected the application, one of your investors didn't fill out the form right, and you have to chase down some head honcho at Anheuser-Busch to get the form filled out.
Yeah.
So a lot of the timing, it does depend on how quickly you can get things to them. Don't be surprised if they ask for a lot of additional information. I mean, I've done this professionally for years. Still, they always ask for additional information. So don't worry about that. Just be as quick as possible to get that in. And my most recent ones, they have been about 3 months.
Yeah, they do pretty well. Get online. Fill out as much information as you can. You can fill out the entire application and just not hit submit until you have that lease signed. The day you sign your lease, you can hit submit on that thing if you have all the information and get that application in and get it queued up.
Yeah. Don't upload the attachments until you're ready to sign because they will not save the attachments.
Right.
But save everything else, and I start working on those days, weeks in advance.
Absolutely.
Load them all up. You just store them pretty much forever. If you change something later on, just go in and click it in, and then once you get that very last piece, you just go ahead and send it.
And I suggest if you're getting close to where you're going to be getting this process started, or even if you have a long ways before that, go on, create a profile for yourself, go through an application, fill out bogus information, don't hit submit because then you might get a phone call from TTB, but go through the application. It's going to require you to fill things out to move on to the next page. But you can just insert some information, get a feel for that application. That'll make it go a lot faster for you when you're actually filling it out for real.
Yeah, and I just start doing sketches online, just kind of outlining things, and then I start making notes for myself. Oh, I need to make sure I get my security statement. I need to make sure I remember this thing, and just start building it. And I'll work a month or two on just creating it because it can take that long for me to get everything.
And you say 6 months is a far, and I've never seen one take 6 months.
I have not seen
electronic
the
system.
inline ones, unless there really is a problem.
Yep.
3 to 4 months,
Yep.
Which is why you don't want to do in paper. We actually did an amended BRRRR's notice on paper that took 2.5 years. We actually closed the BRRRR before they approved it.
Wow.
Amended. Don't do paper.
Don't do paper. Well, thank you so much, Janine. That's been incredibly informative. The homework you want us to complete more forms in the BRRRR's notice, the personal history statement. You know, you don't really, you don't need to complete any forms for the homework. We just want you to go on, get familiar with those forms, go through the site, check out the information that's available on TTB. I think you'll find it extremely valuable. Just spend some time on that site and spend some time with the applications. And I believe that's all we have for you today. I have to run to watch the Portland Timbers game, so I'll have to let you go. Go Timbers, go USA. Thank you all, and we'll see you next week. Good? Sounds good. How do I end?
Great session, guys. Did you see where to turn it off, Marcus?
I'm trying to figure it out.
It's the other tab.
Got it. How do I get Melly back on?
I'm there. You hear me?
Yep.
But I'll disappear as soon as you turn off the session.
All right.
That was
Bye-bye.
great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.